Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming to this presentation. You know, you're all new project managers, and the fact that you are here today tells me a lot about you. Your managers have seen something in you that makes them confident that you are able to conduct productive team members so that you can get your work package accomplished. So that's why I'm here to ensure that you have some basics to get you going and rolling. I know you have your first meetings coming up soon. We're hoping by the end of the month. So what we're going to learn here today is why meetings are important, and we're going to talk about when having a meeting and some possible other alternatives. We want to talk about preparing the meeting agenda, which is really a tool for you to make sure your meeting is productive and accomplishes whatever the meeting was. And then we've got some other objectives there that you can read. Now first, let's talk about when you need to have a meeting. Now if the meeting is going to take longer than an hour, or you feel like you need to meet more than monthly, then there's a chance you might want to start considering some other options to supplement your needs to schedule meetings. You know, look at instant messaging, look at one-on-one telephone conversations. But you don't want to have meetings that are so long or so frequent that they become like old news, you know, where people are almost dreading another one of your meetings. So you may have to mix it up to make sure your meetings are always concise and on an as needed basis, and you want to make sure you get the right people to the table. If you got people to come in and they're so impatient, and you got them there for 2 or 3 hours, then that's not going to create the type of meeting environment you want. So you want to make sure that you have it when you need to have a meeting, other than just when you want to show everybody that you're the project manager, you want to be in charge. We also want to talk about making the meeting convenient for everyone. You want to look at convenient times and days, and that's where your homework. Do some homework. Know when people can come to meetings. You want to make sure it's in a comfortable location where it's not so hot, people are falling asleep, or so cold that they can't concentrate on what you're saying. And also you want to test that media equipment before you get in there so that you don't be embarrassed with that. Now, the meeting agenda is probably one of the most important parts of your meeting. This will make a determination of whether or not your meeting is going to be productive. So you get that agenda out there, make sure it includes the objectives, the date, the location, when the meeting was started, when it was stopped, those people that are people or groups that are expected to attend, and again, only people that need to be there. I don't have a lot of people that are just sitting around the table when the meeting has nothing to do with them at the end. And the rule of thumb is, will they perform any work? You know, and if the answer is no, they're not going to be hands-on operation. You might want to consider a manager's briefing or something outside of inviting them to the meeting. You want to make sure logistics are in order. If you're not co-located and things of that nature, let them know where to park. You know, let them know, you know, from this direction, come that direction. Now, that could be an attachment to the agenda, but consider those type of things to do that. You want to prioritize those issues that are most important, you know, because you want to give some time frames. Like, we're going to talk about this, you know, for 15 minutes. Well, you make sure you get the important stuff out first. Everybody's at the meeting. Now it's time to maintain order. Here's some simple things that you can focus on. First of all, majority rules, and we're going to talk about consensus a little bit later, but everybody should be heard. Make sure that everyone feels their participation is essential and valued there, but you also want to engage some strategies to try to get everybody engaged and make it the meeting worth their while. In other words, by always, even though you're trying to maintain your order and everything, you want to make sure everyone feels comfortable and welcome, and as though you invited them there because you know that they have something to offer, you know, to your project or your work package or whatever. Don't just allow people to just kind of drift off, and, you know, cell phones could be banned, or they must be put up at any rate. You know, they can't, you know, be checking social media in the middle of your meeting. So set some rules up front, you know, about some things that you can't tolerate. You are dealing with adults, but sometimes you even have to remind adults, you know, what's acceptable and respectable behavior. So, you know, those cell phones, man, they get a lot of people in trouble with these meetings. So set your rules in the very beginning so that everyone will understand what's expected for them, and that won't be a distraction as you move for it. And speaking about engagement, one way that you can make sure that you keep engagement and make sure everybody participates is you want to look for opportunities where if you see somebody kind of drifting off on you, whatever, ask them a question. And this is what you do, not ask a general question. You call their name. So and so, what do you think about the last point? Let them be a little uncomfortable. Let them be a little embarrassed because you want everybody in there to know that you need your attention and you may be calling on them next. So don't hesitate to do that to make sure that everybody's listening and engaged. Now, here's another thing to do is that when you have everybody there, since your work packages are so specific and is focused on accomplishing your team's work, you might want to look at some brainstorming. There's a lot of cliches and processes and recommendations for brainstorming, but as new project managers, I hope to just kind of share 5 quick little procedures, a process, a simple approach to brainstorming that I hope will help you, if nothing else, as you begin to get more and more experience, and you can add to this. But these are the fundamentals. Make sure you have a problem that's stated, either a problem or an objective that you can build a consensus around understanding this needs to be addressed. Okay. Next thing, have you throw out the first possible solution. You know, you put your solution out there. At this point, you're just trying to get solutions identified. So you put the first solution up there to get everyone comfortable. Next, you want to ask them, some of the things that they would think. And as all of the solutions get there, then you begin to identify them one at a time. And then you wait until you've got all of the solutions up there before you come back and start actually trying to look at those more thoroughly and break them apart and assign tasks and everything. So you do want to make sure you get the most. And then before you leave that brainstorming, you want to determine who's going to do what, who's been assigned what task, how do you track and monitor. So those are things that are included in the brainstorming. So now let's talk about managing conflict, because you've got this brainstorming session and people are getting hot, everybody's getting excited, synergy. Well, sometimes with synergy comes conflict. So as the project manager, as your team leader, you are going to have to know how to handle it when those emotions start flowing and the juices are going up. You can either mediate, which is look for common ground. You can arbitrate, which means that, hey, you have the authority to impose a solution if it comes to that. You can kind of break it up with a little bit of humor, tell a joke, make fun of something. Let yourself be the target of some type of humor. Deflect the passion is what I'm trying to say. Worst case scenario, and I hope this doesn't come to this, you can join the meeting, take a 5-minute break or whatever. Give them a chance to kind of cool off, but you don't want to pour water on that enthusiasm, but you do need them to cool off. So don't be afraid to give a break there. Sometimes you just have to accept that there's going to be differences among your team. So you accept it, but just let them know, hey, look, this is too important. We need to resolve this. We're going to table it for right now so that we can move on to the next thing, next points of discussion. But you just make sure that you always come back to that, especially if it's something that's especially important for your team to be able to accomplish for your work package and get them done. Acceptance now does not mean acceptance totally and forever. So if in the best interest of getting everything else done, you have to accept something and table it and move on to do that. Worst case scenario, if somebody's just really out of control or a group is just really out of control, you can actually ask them to leave. You can eliminate the disruptive force or destructive individuals. What I hate about asking people to leave the meeting is that you are giving up a little bit of your control and authority, because that person is now controlling you in your meeting, because they're determining how long they're going to be there, when they're not going to be there anymore, and they're draining. Normally when they get up to leave, they're draining some of the energy from what's going on in the room. So you don't want to be quick to ask someone to leave. And if you do get in a position where you have to ask someone to leave, will you make sure that you meet with that person soon after that meeting? You sit down and talk, and we're going to talk about how to deal with disruptive and difficult people next. But you make sure that that person, before it's all over, understands that that behavior was not acceptable and it did not contribute towards your team being able to accomplish your objectives and get your work package done. So you take control of that individual on a one-on-one basis as soon as possible. You set expectations for how you expect them to conduct themselves the next meeting. Try to have a relationship with them to the point that you don't have to bring in a higher level manager or whatnot. But if that does persistently begin to happen, then it is time to get some intervention. So now you got all of the juices flowing. Everybody's all excited. It's going, and you need to start. Your brainstorming session is just going great. So now it's time to start building consensus around those solutions. Consensus, I define it as 70% or more in agreement on something. That may leave 30% of the people unsatisfied. So what do you do in those situations? Well, first of all, you have to understand that people coming into these meetings with sometimes personal biases. They've got contests and competition going on before they even sit down. This group doesn't like this group. That group doesn't like that group. This person doesn't like that person. So what you can't allow your meeting to do is dissolve into like these little personal competitions and where it's us against them and yada yada yada. And a really good way for you to determine when you've got that situation going on and disrupting your brainstorming, as soon as someone points at somebody else and say you, I mean, even if they don't physically point, if they're using you and directing that at somebody else, they have turned that into a personal thing because they're judging whether or not they approve of that person's behavior. So you have to step in right there and make sure you start separating whatever the point of contention is from the people or the individuals involved, and make sure you get everybody focused back on exactly, what's important here. Keep that going. Another thing you can do this is that if you've got somebody that's just being real belligerent, I hate to say it, but you've seen it, I've seen it. If you've got somebody being real belligerent and they're just so convinced that it's not going to work, it's not going to work, what you want to do is kind of make sure you seek first to understand. So you ask that person, okay, I appreciate it, blah, 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 blah. Why isn't this going to work in your opinion? And you listen, honestly listen to what they have to say. Sometimes you're just going to get a lot of whining and complaining. Truth is, project managers, your job is going to be a lot of listening to people whining and complaining. But you listen. Sometimes just that person knowing that they're being heard and they're being understood is enough to kind of get them back into where you need to be, so you can, pull what you need from them. So listen to what they're saying to show them that you listen. You summarize and play it back to them. And then you start trying to say, okay, this is what we can do for mutual gain. And you start kind of showing them what they get. Yeah, they may lose this, but you're going to get this. And you start playing for the positives and looking how, okay, these are going to be things that are good for you, even though the group is moving on. Because keep in mind, this is the 30%. This is a person that is not a part of the consensus. So let him understand what he's going to get from approaching what the other 70% have already decided is a great idea. Another tool that's available to you is to look for some type of objective criteria. Like you can look at standards or SOPs or blah, blah, blah. Worst case or last option where the boss wants it done that way. Try to avoid that because that takes some of your power away as a project manager. So if at all possible, refer to standards, standard operating procedures. If not, try to find another way to resolve that the interactions with that difficult person, but you can fall back on those rules if those rules are there indeed. Here's another option. It's called back knot, and this is the best alternative to negotiated agreement. You have to be careful with this, but sometimes people just, you draw a line in the sand and you're saying, no, I'm getting up from the table. Okay, well, here's how that works. Now, if it's to your advantage that you can get up to the table and the other person is going to lose something and it's worth, they don't want to lose it, then you can just say, look, we're not going to agree, but I am also not going to do X, Y, Z until we come up with something that's going to work for both of us. That's if you have the advantage of getting up from the table. If you find yourself in a position where that's not your advantage, then you have to sometimes be a part of that 30% yourself and go along with what that person is saying. But as a project management, Manager, don't make that a habit. You need to find out what you learned from that experience and come up with a strategy to put yourself back into the most advantageous position. So the next time you are again the one in a position that can get up and say, look, do it my way or else, yada, yada, yada. So be careful with that. Now, here's the most important part, and sometimes the most neglected would be your minutes, because your minutes will determine whether or not your meeting had any return on investment. So minutes are not some narrative to share everybody how well you write. You want it to be clear and concise, and it has to be directed toward people that were at the meeting. It's not something that you want to use for your managers and blah, 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 to let them know what everybody said. You do that one-on-one. You communicate that one-on-one. This is for people at the meeting. You want to make sure that they have a recall of what's going on, especially their task assignments. You want the points of contention clearly marked and everything. And you want those minutes done properly. One thing that would really hurt is for you to get them out there a month late, and some of those tasks have been missed, and now it becomes your fault, because you didn't get it out there, and they went, oh, I didn't know I'd agreed to do that, okay? So you want to get those minutes out. Okay, so now we're going to move into an exercise. You're going to prepare the agendas for your first meeting. That is my understanding you're supposed to conduct by the end of this month. So I'm going to open up for about 5 minutes worth of questions. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to come back and get right to work.